Protein. Shut them up. Steak, love it. Fish, chicken. Fried chicken is also included. Turkey. Greek yogurt, yes. Peanut butter pretzels. Okay, here's a quick thing on, we're going to skip a few slides, but there is protein in peanut butter. But do you think there's better sources of protein than peanut butter? Yeah. Pretty much everything else that we mentioned that wasn't peanut butter pretzels is a better source of protein per calories. Any other types of protein? So we did like fish, cooked eggs, perfect, very good. Dairy, it's a really good one. Collagen is a type of protein. Collagen is a protein that helps keep structural integrity to a lot of our like cells and tendons and stuff like that. So it is a type of protein. You'll hear a lot of like collagen like things that people supplement. Good for you. Do it. There's also foods that are higher in collagen, so yeah, eat that stuff. Protein is wonderful, and this is how we should all start. Everything that everyone mentioned here today, except maybe the peanut butter pretzels, that's a great place to start in terms of protein. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Next macronutrient is fat. Because you need fat to live. You need protein to live, you need fat to live. Non-negotiable. So that's pretty much where you're going to start in terms of your macronutrients. What does fat do? It helps keep us alive in terms of metabolic and cellular health. It also gives structure to some of our organs and some of our cells. So for example, your kidneys are surrounded by a small layer of fat around it. Fat's also really good to keep us alive when calories are not abundant. How many calories are in 1 gram of fat? 9. So it's really calorie dense, right? Well, we eat some sources of fat and we can kind of turn that into fat that we store, or called adipose tissue. And a lot of people are like, oh, it's bad, I don't want that. Well, what happens if you're starving? What happens if food wasn't abundant? What happens if you couldn't go to Subway and get 4,000 calories in one sandwich? Well, if you're starving, your body still needs energy to keep this on. So how are we going to use that energy? Well, we're going to use some of the stored body fat that we have. So in every single human in this room, irrespective of your body fat percentage, you have more than enough energy stored in your body fat that you could run a marathon, if not 2 right now. You might not be good at it, but you could. So fat is really good source of energy for low impact stuff. If you are doing Muay Thai and you have 5 rounds of hellish pads with Dylan, do you think fat's going to be the best energy source though? No. What are you all doing right now? You're all chilling? What should you be using right now? A bunch of fat just to keep breathing, just to keep the lights on. Cool. You need at least 40 grams of fat per day. That's super easy to get for most people. I've never heard of any type of RD that would recommend less fat than 40 grams per day. You're probably going to run into some issues. Very easy to get, especially if you eat meat, because a lot of meat has fat. First protein source that you mentioned was steak. A delicious steak often has a good bit of fat in it too, just for flavor. That's important later. Does fat make you fat? No. Maybe? Yes? What are our thoughts?
Certain fats, like saturated fat.
I knew someone was going to talk about that. There are different types of fat. I'm not going to go super into that today because it's in the weeds stuff. Certain fats are better or worse for your health than others. Omega-6 fats are like generally stuff that you want to cut out. Think of stuff like canola oil and like all those like dirty oils that you would get in like McDonald's and stuff like that, like what they fry the potatoes in. That type of stuff you probably don't want to maximize as compared to other healthier types of fat. It's not going to kill you to have it, but yeah, probably better to avoid some of that. So does fat make you fat? It can. Only if you eat too much of it because you're in a caloric surplus. Is it easier to put someone in a caloric surplus if they have a shitload of fat in their diet? Yes, because it's the most energy dense macronutrient we have. So you kind of look at someone's daily calorie balance. You kind of want to see how much of their calories are coming from fat. And if it's a ton, a very easy way to reduce calories on someone is just reduce the fat. So what are some good sources of fat? Shout them out. Avocados, love it. I wonder where you got that idea from. Other source of fat. Almond butter, very good. Steak, good one. Olive oil, very good. Coconut. Fish. Yeah, salmon. Eggs. Cheese, very good. Yes, and we'll talk about chocolate later. Any other good source of fat? Chicken? Yeah. What part of the chicken has less fat and what part of the chicken has more fat in it? Exactly. So the breast is really high in protein, fairly low in fat, versus like the darker meat or like the legs and stuff like that that have a little bit more fat. What's tastier? Yeah, fuck yeah. If anyone said, oh, the breast is tastier, you're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. Cool, yeah, exactly. Okie dokie. Last macronutrient we have, carbohydrates. Do you need carbs to live? Yes. No. There's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. What would happen if you didn't have carbs? You'd suck. You'd hate your life. Carbs are horrible. Carbs are just the best, man. We love carbs here. So you don't technically need a carbohydrate to live. You can, exactly, ketogenic diets. Quick note on ketogenic diets. I'm sure everyone's heard of that before. A ketogenic diet is a diet that's very high in fat, medium protein, and like as little carbohydrate as possible. Why did the keto diet come about? If anyone knows this, I'll give them a protein bar.
Just tap into your reserves. You store it on fat.
Pardon me?
Tap into reserves. You store fat. When you are, you push your body to make your reserves.
Yeah, using dietary fat. But why did people think a ketogenic diet was a good idea to begin with? Or who is it kind of useful for? Say that? Yeah, could be a preference thing. People that are insulin resistant, kind of. You could go there, but maybe not. Epilepsy. Yeah. Epileptic children. If you have epilepsy, they've actually found that the severity of the seizures, the severity of the incidence tends to decrease on a lower carbohydrate diet. That came out around like fucking 110 years ago, something like that. So there you go. That's why people do keto, or that's why people should do keto. So like your Weight Watchers mom who's like, I did keto and I lost 40 pounds because carbs are evil. No, she might have lost 40 pounds because she was in a calorie correct, and she might have done that by eating less carbohydrates. But I don't know. Yeah. And also, what are you kind of making harder by having a high fat diet? Your amount of calories that you're consuming. Because what is more calories? Fat or carbohydrate? Fat by double. So carbohydrates are like rocket fuel. Carbohydrates are basically your body's like preferred energy source. Carbohydrates is stored as glycogen, and you have glycogen in your muscles. And you might have heard of this before. You have muscle glycogen, and then you also have glycogen in the liver. But by far, your muscles contain the most amount of glycogen. Why? Because our muscles need to do stuff. So it kind of makes sense to have like a little bit of a fuel storage when you need to do stuff quickly. But it's not infinite. That's why you need to eat carbohydrates in order to have carbohydrates stored in order to do work. Do you think people on a ketogenic diet that have no carbohydrates are very good performers for high level work? No. Fucking awful. Anyone that's ever done a weight cut when you've cut carbohydrates out, what's your performance like that week? Dog shit. Really bad. Because high performance stuff requires carbohydrates. Oh, sorry. So, you have basically two types of carbohydrates that you can look at. You might have heard of this. It's called high GI carbohydrates versus low GI. Basically, some fuel burns super quickly, and some fuel is kind of like a slower burn. Oxidizes slower and turns into fuel a little bit slower. Think about like a smoothie. That's processed in a way that makes it very easy to digest. So you have a bunch of berries in your smoothie. So you blend it up, super easy to drink. You could probably drink that, let's say 300 calories in that smoothie a lot quicker than you could eat it. Because eating requires time to chew and digest. And it also changes how you digest it because it's not processed in a way that's blended. So some carbohydrates burn fast, some carbohydrates burn a little bit slower. Think about white bread versus whole wheat, like a brown bread. White bread is very quick to just release into energy.